Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today, we are very lucky to have Dr. Eben Alexander, and he's going to be talking about his book, Proof of Heaven. And for those of you who may not know Dr. Eben Alexander, I think a lot of people are familiar with your book since it's a New York Times bestseller. He was a renowned neurosurgeon and went to my alma mater, Duke, for medical school, and UNC, which we won't talk about here. And he was a neurosurgeon and was understanding the brain and consciousness from that perspective. And he had a near-death experience from E. coli bacterial meningitis. And and through that near-death experience, it's really, I assume, changed your life, and how he experiences life and what he's learned about life itself. So we're going to learn all about that. So welcome, Dr. Alexander.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So I want to first start off with consciousness and what your discoveries were when you were on you call it an adventure, your near-death experience as an adventure. And then actually, when you read the book, Proof of Heaven, it does sound like an adventure. But you uh, described it as something that was very important for not only our own understanding, but also scientific understanding. So I wanted to first start off with consciousness. And you've been studying this for a while, the last 8 years. What's your understanding of consciousness? What is it?
Well, I think consciousness in its purest sense is that awareness that we have, that we exist.
Mm-hmm.
As Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And it's that awareness of existence that is actually such a deep mystery. And
Mm-hmm.
the science that I had studied so rigorously for all of those decades as a neurosurgeon, before my coma, which occurred back in November of 2008, that science, which I would call conventional neuroscience, very clearly says the physical brain creates consciousness out of physical matter, the
Mm-hmm.
substance of the brain. And what my journey showed me very clearly, and this is largely because of the fact that I had gram-negative bacterial meningitis, a very severe form of the worst kind of meningitis you can have. It's pretty much uniformly fatal to have that severe a disease as I had, and it drove me into coma within a few hours
Wow.
and left me there for a week. By the end of that week, my doctors had pretty much given up hope. They thought I had a 2% chance of survival. And if I was going to be in that lucky 2%, what that really meant was coming back to this world only in coma, not really ever waking up and going to a nursing home and then finally dying there a few months later. And that's why my doctors were recommending that um, they discontinue antibiotics and let nature take its course. Now, the reason it's so important, the diagnosis, is it's such a perfect model for human death. Meningitis attacks the outer surface of the brain, the neocortex, and all of our conventional neuroscientific ideas of consciousness very clearly stipulate that the neocortex must be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it may not be the primary generator of consciousness, for any kind of detailed conscious awareness, you've got to have some parts of that neocortex functioning. My doctors knew perfectly well that my neocortex was very badly damaged
Tell
and was not.
for people who aren't familiar with the neocortex, tell us what is the function of that part.
Well, it's really the outer surface of the brain, and everything that you ever experience as a human being, everything you see, everything you hear, all of your kind of rational, logical thinking, everything about how we see our body in relation to things around us, etc., demands certain parts of that neocortex be functioning.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying is the details of conscious awareness depend heavily on that neocortex. And that's why, to me, it was such a gigantic shock
Yeah.
deep in this coma that as my disease was progressing and my neocortex was being destroyed, in fact, what I was witnessing was a greater enhancement of consciousness. It was completely elevated out of the false little sense of a here and now. Um, and that is a very, very difficult thing to explain. The ultra reality, the way of knowing in that realm that far transcends the little trickle of conscious awareness that we have in these physical bodies. And that's why people often describe near-death experiences as this mind-blowing overdose of ultra-real phenomena and experience, all the way to becoming one with the universe throughout all of eternity. I mean, it's these things really lose all kind of conceptual conveyance in our language, because our language was basically evolved to allow us to describe earthly events to each other.
Hmm.
And our language is not at all well suited to describing such otherworldly journeys, especially when our very consciousness is altered and we get this extreme overflow of information.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so hard to explain. And of course, the gift was that I had this severe meningitis that had destroyed my neocortex, which completely violated everything that our conventional neuroscience says about the neocortex and how consciousness is created. But what it showed me very clearly is the physical brain does not create consciousness at all. And that is a very important observation. In fact, this is where all of the scientific world on this question is headed, is a realization that we have to think much bigger. We have to expand our notion of the nature of reality and realize that consciousness is actually fundamental. And it
Hmm.
is what creates all of the world that unfolds around us. In fact, the illusion before my coma as a practicing neurosurgeon, I thought, well, the physical world is all that exists. The illusion is consciousness, but I had it backwards.
Mm.
And this has to do with a very mind-body discussion that's been going on, for at least 2,400 years about the relationship of the brain and the mind and how the one interacts and may create the other. And what it points out is that our science, that conventional neuroscience, just has it completely wrong.
Hmm.
And there's a very major piece of evidence in our science in that there's something called the hard problem of consciousness. And when you get deeply into that, you start to realize that our materialist science has absolutely nothing whatsoever to say about how the physical brain might create consciousness. And that's a tremendous clue as to the nature of the problem. The problem is that consciousness is fundamental. And
Hmm.
consciousness is what actually creates all the rest of this, including the physical realm and everything that we see around us. So it's a complete 180
Reversal of
degree
like how
flip.
we really should think about it. And it's funny because I read what you wrote, and then I was explaining to my husband this morning. We were walking, and I said, "Oh yeah, here's what this book is about." And I said, "Wait a second!" Like I read it, and because it was so contrary to the way that I think I've been trained to think about it, I fast forwarded past it. And so just for in the interest of the audience, just in case they did the same thing, because it is pretty mind blowing. Like what you just said is, gigantic, which is that I always thought that even when I'm meditating, right, that when I'm tapping into something greater, I'm doing that through my brain, through my body. It's something in my brain that's actually helping create the physical sensations, the visions, the memories. And what I'm hearing you say is it has nothing to do with your brain. I mean, when you're tapping into something greater, it's not through your brain, which is just,
Well, I
is that
wouldn't
what you said? Is that what you meant to say?
I
Is that?
wouldn't say it has nothing to do with the brain. The big mistake is thinking the brain as a physical system is
Hmm.
creating consciousness out of its physical constituents. That's the mistake. And in fact, that has never led anywhere. The better scientific version for a model that is emerging today is called filter theory, which is
Hmm.
basically that the brain serves as a filter or reducing valve that limits primordial consciousness down to this tiny little trickle of the apparent here and now of what we exist. So, in other words, don't look at the brain as the creator, but it's more like a transceiver, or I think a better word is filter.
Receiver or
Yeah,
filter.
that simply allows conscious awareness to manifest down in this realm, in this, because things like time and space are themselves illusory constructs of that consciousness. And it's reading it all out of, an informational system, but it's not the physical universe as an objective reality that scientific revolution has been looking for the last 400 years. Um, So it's a very different way of looking at conscious awareness and what it is, but it completely opens the door to the reality of the kind of experiences that people describe by the tens of thousands in near-death experiences, shared-death
Mm-hmm.
experiences, after-death communications, past life memories in children indicative of reincarnation. I mean, there's a tremendous category of kind of conscious experience that is extraordinary and defies all of our conventional models. But in fact, it's at those edges that you actually are able to make the most progress in understanding the mundane aspects of consciousness. Because I promise you, the biggest mystery of all is not what I went through and others by the millions have gone through with these spiritually transformative experiences, even though, yes, those are quite interesting and mysterious. The deep mystery and the real mystery of it all remains the nature of consciousness itself. And that is where I think many scientists are rising to the challenge here.
Are
Uh,
they? Who are these scientists? Because I've talked to some people, and it seems like most scientists are incredulous. So, who
no,
are
I
the
would
science rising to the occasion, and what are they studying?
Well, I can give you two
Okay, good.
incredibly powerful resources, two books that are very, very good about all this. They
Yeah.
are deep and tough and challenging. They are not for the general reader or
Okay. About
the
forewarned.
armchair investigator. These things are very deep. One book, I talk about this book in Proof of Heaven. It's called Irreducible Mind Toward a Psychology for the 21st Century. It
Hmm.
was edited by Ed Kelly, Emily Williams Kelly, Bruce Grayson, and others out of the University of Virginia.
Hmm.
It's listed on my website. If people go to ebenalexander.com, there's a reading list on there, and at the very top of that reading list is the book of the century, and that's Irreducible Mind. Normally, I have the book of the month up there, but
Right.
right now it's the book of the century. Is actually the sequel to that book because
Hmm.
that book came out in 2007. That book was very important to me in helping me understand my journey, and it's a very scientific work
Hmm.
on every bit of this.
Hmm.
But the problem is the materialist science that I used to worship before my coma, the pure physicalism, that
Right.
the physical is the only thing that exists, that is the very shallow end of the pool. That is kindergarten.
Hmm.
That has nothing to do with the really deep, profound notions of reality that you will find if you read a book like Irreducible Mind. And the second book to mention is from the same group. And that book just came out in February of last year, just about a year ago. And that book is called Beyond Physicalism Toward Reconciliation of Science and Spirituality. Again, the lead editor there is Ed Kelly, uh, and and others from the Esalen Institute and from the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies. They are really one of the world leaders in this kind of
Hmm.
understanding of the nature of consciousness, how it leaves that simplistic and false model of brain creates consciousness, which is the conventional kind of materialist
Right.
scientific view of reality, leaves that far in the dust. We're no longer in the shallow end of the pool, though, and that's why I'm warning people. Those are
Right.
very, very deep reads, but they are also well worth it for the true seeker. They get very deeply into the nature of reality, do not deny all the evidence that's been out there. For example, um, the conventional neuroscientific assessment of near-death experiences is some very minimal discussion around oxygen tension in the brain
Hmm.
and some ideas about carbon dioxide and how you can maybe release DMT or
Hmm.
use ketamine to mimic these experiences, etc. But they don't remotely come into the ballpark of being able to explain the full-blown nature of the majority of these kind of experiences.
Okay.
So it takes a completely new mindset to begin to
Okay, I
get
have
to
to
it.
read that book, but you said something that was also mind blowing. That you said, we think that it's that consciousness is something that the brain creates. Now we're realizing that consciousness is the seed of the foundation of everything. What the heck did that mean? I
Well, I can tell you a lot of what it means. First of all, important to point out that the brain and mind pull off one of the most amazing and shocking tricks imaginable. And that is that all of the out there, when I look out the window and I see the mountains and the clouds and the trees, everything around me, and this home that I'm sitting in, and all of that, and we're tricked into believing that what we're experiencing is all of the stuff out there, but we're not. What we're experiencing is an internal model, a construct within mind that is supposed to represent all the stuff that is out there, but you're not having a direct experience of the stuff out there at all.
Hmm.
What you're experiencing, like when light comes in and hits my eye and the retina and then goes through pathways of the brain, transferring the information to me, what I'm experiencing is the final product of that that is put together in consciousness. And yes, there is a certain amount of fidelity of the model within
Hmm.
mind to what is out there, but the mistake is in believing that what is out there is what you're experiencing, because you're
Right.
not.
Well,
And that is a crucial part of this. This is
uh,
why, there's so much work in psychology to show how many things are illusory, how you can create visual hallucinations. You can also trick the nervous system into kind of using visual, because it usually defaults to visual as the most important source of information. But you can have all kinds of optical illusions that have to do with other modes of sensory perception interfering with vision in such a way where they may be bringing in the better information, but the visual system seems to trump it. But then it gets much deeper, because when you really get down to it, the deepest mystery that we uncover as we investigate this modeling of the external world in the brain is what we find in the whole world of quantum physics, quantum mechanics. The whole reason
mm,
they tell us,
hmm.
the measurement problem itself very specifically points out that the conscious observer is absolutely essential at creating anything that emerges into reality as an observation about the world.
Hmm.
And when you get into the very deep essence of quantum physics and what it's trying to tell us about that, what it is really showing us is that consciousness is fundamental. That consciousness is what exists and then paints this picture of reality. The brain and mind and consciousness fool us into thinking that all the out there is out there. But never forget, it is truly a model within the mind. And it's in that very fine discussion about the relationship of what may be out there with the internal representation of it that is of great interest. But don't be fooled into believing that what is out there is as it appears. Uh,
Do you ever wonder why God, or whatever you want to call this greater entity, created a model like this? It seems like a design flaw that our brain
no,
was created this way.
I would say, in fact, it's very well designed to. I'm sorry, I'm having to rotate my camera a bit,
The
but
light is
it's very
shining on
well.
you.
The thing to remember, from my point of view,
Yeah.
is this world that we live in, our four-dimensional space-time, where we come incarnate in these physical forms, is beautifully designed to serve as a stage on which the drama of sentient beings in all of their interactions and in all their learning and teaching of lessons and understanding of the workings of the universe can play out these roles. This is where we face those hardships and difficulties. When I came back from my coma, it was very clear to me that the challenges in life, the hardships, and certainly as a doctor, I'll tell you that includes illness and injury, that those are gifts. They are there for a reason. Those are the stepping stones. They are the engines of growth of the soul, of all of conscious evolution. So
Hmm.
don't think that it's poorly designed. In fact, it's just the
No,
opposite.
you're saying the experience is perfectly designed because we're put on here on this earth in which there's a mix of love and evil and good and bad and those kinds of things and our free will, all of which actually help us love and grow. I get that part, but it seems like the brain, which we are now like residing in most of the times, thinking that consciousness is created from the brain, but it's really just a filter or receiving device. And in fact, it's a filtering or receiving device that can get us believing that our illusions are true. To me, it seems that there's somehow the brain is a design flaw.
No, the way I look at it is there, that's what I call the veiling function. The fact that this world around us, our day-to-day mundane existence, is not all there is. And of course, when people have profound spiritually transformative experiences, that certainly includes near-death experiences, but there are many other categories to go into. These are kind of glimpsing behind the veil, as I like to put it. They are seeing kind of the deeper aspects of reality that are there all the time, and that in fact our higher soul knows about. But we come into these incarnations on this side of the veil to participate in this soul school, this learning and teaching, and the fundamental lessons. Even though, yes, we are here to learn as much as we can about our existence and about the existence of the world, um, in fact, there is so much about the lesson that as sentient beings we are to learn, and that has to do with those lessons of loving ourselves. That's why I mentioned in Proof of Heaven how the coin of that realm is that love. It's fundamentally the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that we're here to learn to manifest that love for ourselves, love for our fellow beings, to show love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy in all of our dealings with others. That is the current lesson for
Okay, I get
humanity.
it. Okay, so what you're
And
saying, yeah. Okay, so
we
we're
learn it through these hardships and difficulties and challenges and how we deal with them. The more we can manifest that love for self and love for others in everything we do, the more we're on a pathway of ascendance. But we do have free will. We can make the choice. We don't have to choose that way. We can choose to hand out pain and suffering, and we can be greedy. And in general, I would say that, the less far along a certain soul group is in this pathway, or especially a certain soul, the more they're going to manifest those kind of primitive and barbaric tendencies that are very ego driven.
mm-hmm.
And then the more a soul advances, and in the second book, which is called The Map of Heaven, I go a little more into some of this, um, and also in many of my presentations. But it's really about that progression of understanding, and we're all participants in that learning and
Mm-hmm.
manifesting that free will, kind of seeking the pathway of ascendance, that pathway of knowing. But the pathway always involves that deep and profound unconditional love. It has infinite power to heal. And to me, you're really missing the point if you deny the importance of that love and of this kind of aspect of soul school for what we're all doing here, what we're all participating in.
Okay, so what I just got from what you said was that our primary reason here on Earth, why we're here and why we're brought on Earth, is because it's the best school ever, because there are all these different souls at different stages of their existence, either creating hardship or bringing love. And so our challenge is to always go to a place of love, to bring love. That is our primary goal here on Earth, which is to learn to love. And we have free will, so sometimes we don't. Maybe our souls are young, sometimes we don't. But in the end of the day, that's why we're here, to love.
Uh, and also, I think important to point out that this is not just about human beings. Human beings have a way of kind of putting themselves up on some pedestal. I remember before my coma, I might have been tempted to argue that, and I would probably try to say it's because of language.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, what I've learned in my journey is the only thing humans do that really sets them on a pedestal of any sort, certainly apart from animals, is that humans cook. Other than that, other than that, I would say we should not claim any great credit for language because, in fact, animals can have a very rich form of communication. In fact, I think that telepathy, kind of mind-to-mind communication, can be pretty well handled
Mm.
with animals. It certainly can be well handled in humans as long as humans are open to it and realize that the signals are coming in, that we can be telepathic, that we are part of one mind. Uh,
Okay, so it's to
but
love everything and to
right.
realize we are all love, whether it's the animal that loves us, the plants that love us, or we love them back reciprocally. Is
And
that your?
also, this is not just occurring on Earth. This is a much bigger paradigm. This whole business of soul school, sentient beings participating in this exercise, is something that is all through this universe and all through broad swaths of time and space. So It's a
Okay.
much bigger deal than I ever thought before.
Okay, because and that was one of the things that in your book you talk about. You go through the very initial stages of your adventure or near death experience, and then you talk about multiple realities. And you said that first you talk about time, and you say time in this place was different from simple linear time, and is hopelessly difficult to describe. And then you talk about that there are many different realities. I can't find it exactly. It's like an let's see. You talk about basically multiple realities, simultaneous realities happening at the same time, and that you just describe like, and I travel to them. So I want to talk a little bit about,
Okay.
yeah, what are these parallel realities? What is time like when you traveled on your adventure?
Okay. Well, I think one thing to point out at the outset, just to kind of help set the stage for this, there's that old saying, your life flashes before your eyes.
Hmm.
Well, it turns out that does happen in near-death experiences, and it's not a new concept. This is not just because Raymond Moody wrote in Life After Life back in 1975 that people have a life review when they go through their lives. In fact, if you go back to the writings of Plato, and he talks about Armenian soldier named in some of his writings. And had a very early near-death experience. He was a soldier. He was killed in battle, laid on a funeral pyre. This is all 2,400 years ago. And when he woke up and came back to life, he had quite a story to tell. And that story involved the fact that at the end of your life, you have a life review and you go through all the goods and bads, any residual lessons to be learned. And what he also came to see as an Armenian soldier killed in battle way back then is the only thing that really matters is love. And he made that point very clearly. Now, this was
Mm.
something I knew nothing about before my coma, but I learned about a year or so after my coma, especially in reading Raymond Moody and other things. But it's very important to point all of that out. Now, the reason I mention the life review is because when people go through the life review, they end up having these very sharp, crisp, vivid, alive experiences of vignettes from their life, and they experience them not only from their point of view, but also they feel the emotional power and impact of not only their actions, but also their thoughts
Hmm.
on those around them.
Hmm.
So you become the other souls in feeling this. And what the life review should demonstrate is, for one thing, the boundaries of self are false. They're artificial. They are part
Mm.
of the illusion. And
Mm.
so we come in here and we think that we are a self in this little body. But in fact, we're part of one much grander consciousness that is going through this whole process of kind of learning and teaching
Mm.
itself by
Hmm.
what people go through in these lives and the choices and thoughts and the emotions they feel and what they end up learning about it all. And but the key thing, getting back to your question, is that I've talked to hundreds of people who have been through that kind of thing in addition to what I went through. And the sharp clarity of these events lets you know that they are, people describe them as much more real and crisp even than when they lived through them before.
Mm.
It's a bit mysterious because of that strange quality of feeling the emotional impact on others around you,
Hmm.
and basically hopping soul to feel that, to learn those lessons. But the point I'm making here is that the events seem more real, sharp, crisp, alive, detailed than they are when you live them in the material world. So this
Yeah.
whole lifetime that we live is a string of these events that's very cleverly put together, allowing us to serve as conscious beings going through this existence, making these free will decisions, learning and teaching these lessons as we go with our soul groups, all in that process of evolution. But every bit of that is set up for a higher purpose. And that's why it's so important to realize that the reality that we say is out there, the physical world, the
Right.
physical
The
reality,
material world.
the
Yep.
more you get into the experiments of quantum mechanics, and especially the most recent experiments in the last few years and decades that are the most profound, the more you realize there is no objective underlying reality independent of the conscious observer. And that is kind of the deepest aspect of this. So, in fact, this whole universe, from my perspective, exists so that sentient beings can be conscious of these journeys we go on, can participate in co-creating this evolution of consciousness. And we're all participating in that, just like each and every one of us individually is working towards that ascendance, towards the oneness with the divine and the understanding through multiple lifetimes. That's what all of sentient life throughout the universe is in the process of doing.
And there are
Is that
multiple
whole process
universes.
of learning.
So is it that? And you talk about the. I'm trying to figure out how this connects to. I understand the realness of it, and I understand that in some ways, it's just like a. It's almost like the story that's being recorded someplace else, and that there's this kind of a realer version of it. But what about the multiple universes? I still don't understand how what you're saying connects to the multiple
Well,
universes.
it's mainly that our concept of time, of a here now, like
Yes.
it's very tempting, as a excuse me, as a uh, a human being here in the year 2016 to think, well, the entire universe, given the fact that you have to back, think about the speed of light and how that only allows, sorry, I've got, that only allows certain things to manifest at any one time, that very important, I'm sorry,
I was
that
talking about multiple universes,
oh
and you're
yes,
saying
okay.
think about the speed
In
of light.
time, the point is that we are very tempted to think that all the universe is in the now of right now, in
Right.
January of 2016. That is the part that's illusory, okay? Because in fact, from a very deep standpoint, everything that's happening happens at once in some sense, but from a much higher perspective. I know it sounds a bit obtuse, but in my journey, I try and describe this in Proof of Heaven, how in fact what I saw, even in that Gateway Valley, the beautiful
Mm-hmm.
earth-like valley with a butterfly wing, and I was there with a beautiful girl and all the souls dancing below, all the joyous merriment going on there, that in fact was just one level on the way out, all the way to that core realm. But that I believe that important to see that Gateway Valley is is very much kind of serves for my purpose as an individual to interpret it. And that's why I would say that near death experiences have so many different qualities to them. But in fact, when you go over hundreds or thousands of them, what you end up seeing is that they are have great commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
The similarities far outweigh the differences, and that's a huge part of understanding this. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that each and every one of us is in this process of ascending. In fact, we're parts of soul groups that are in the process of learning and teaching each other in this ascent. And that's why the whole concept of reincarnation, it's important to understand that we kind of come back again and again with these with the same groups at large, and that we can exchange roles and everything depending on what lessons are to be learned
Mm-hmm.
at any given time. But it's all about that process of ascendance and of learning that each and every one of us is doing, all soul groups are doing, all of humanity, all of life on earth is doing. And in fact, that is what is leading to this evolution of consciousness that I believe is the reason for existence for this whole universe.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to go into the all right, so there was a listener question. Do multiple universes run parallel, and can we be in more than one or change among them?
I would say that probably the best answer to that is we have a kind of a center of conscious awareness
Mm-hmm.
that is very free to roam through those realms, including different times, and that is a part that I think to me makes the most sense. So, but the important thing is that every bit of it is centered around this process of soul growth and evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So, even though I guess another way to put it is in all of the possible uh, events, all the possible actualities out there, what I think Edgar Mitchell so beautifully calls the quantum hologram,
Hmm.
and others, David Bohm and others, have talked about that kind of quantum hologram idea. All the possibilities are out there, and what our awareness does is to follow this pathway. And the pathway is the one of learning, and it follows our life journey through many lives. But it has access to certain parts of that hologram, and that's what it uses for the learning and the teaching process and for the growth. And of course, the whole thing can shift as we go, but that quantum hologram serves as the information substrate. So it would be false to view this as multiple parallel universes with all kinds of things going on that are not relevant to the soul journey. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
all of it is driven from a higher causality. And that was the causality, what I call deep time, in that Gateway Valley realm. And of course, even the deep time is a lower level of temporal causality. Because as you get to the core realm, you're really at a place where it is all of possibility, all of eternity and infinity is all contained there. And in fact, human consciousness can actually get to pure oneness with the divine in that realm.
Okay,
But
so here's the thing. When I've heard this before, I think of it, and I don't know what it is because I've never actually experienced. I haven't really, I thought about it, but I haven't really experienced anything like you have. But there's like CJ here on Earth. There's CJ in some other reality. There's CJ in, reality in the past, CJ in the reality in the future, CJ in reality and some, like all these multiple CJs running around. And that all the data from all the multiple CJs are stored in what you call this substrate of
right,
all the information is stored in some as close as God as that I'm going to be, or some call it like my higher self, that all this stuff gets stored. And so that at that moment, yes, I'm living in multiple realities, having understanding the summation of all the various CJs in all these universes. Is that what it is? I've never really quite understood when people try to explain it.
well, I would think the simplest way to explain it is it makes more sense when you can look at it from up there, from that
Okay.
outside. It seems to us, down in this material realm, especially stuck in linear time as we are, um, people then can talk about multiple universes, multiple realities. And what I would say is that's really referring to are the multiple possibilities.
Hmm.
And in fact, the only thing that really exists is the now. When you get right down to it, our conventional physics and cosmology are very, very deeply into the notion that the concept of time that we think of as human beings in an everyday sense, this linear flow of time, is absolutely not the way the underlying reality works.
Hmm.
The underlying reality really is much more of kind of an eternal now. It's a stage on which these things unfold. The interesting thing is that in that kind of conceptualization, past and future are equally kind of murky kind of clouds of possibilities.
Hmm.
They are the possibilities in that quantum hologram, but only the actualities are what we experience as a human mind consciousness that is trying to, monitor all this, learn from it, understand it. Um, is that we can live in that now and have that understanding. But very important to point out that past and future are cleverly wrought illusions, as
Mm-hmm.
Einstein put it. And
Mm.
I think
Wow.
this is really, especially as we get further along the pathway of trying to make sense of quantum mechanics, trying to unite quantum mechanics with relativity, and then trying to explain so many other things like dark matter, dark energy, and beyond, because there are much deeper questions about the nature of space, time, mass, energy, and causality that we will get to in this. But it has everything to do with understanding the role of consciousness, and that consciousness is what exists and basically manifests every bit of what we see unfolding. And as human beings, we get a tiny little sliver of that consciousness on this side of the veil. But
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm such a huge proponent, and I especially make a big push for this in my second book, The Map of Heaven, that came out in October of last year,
Mm-hmm.
or of 14, I mean, 2014. And about meditation, about
Mm-hmm.
going within. And of course, they're the tools that I offer people, which I mention in the appendix to the book, The Map of Heaven. That appendix is entitled The Answers Lie Within Us All.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with tools that I've developed. I work with some people at Sacred Acoustics, Karen Newell, Kevin Cossey, sacredacoustics.com for people who are interested to learn much more about deep meditative tools. And those particular tools with Sacred Acoustics involve sounds, differential frequency sounds that actually do some very interesting things. I try to meditate an hour or two a day. I've been meditating for the last 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
And it really does involve going deep. And these differential sounds that you can find at Sacred Acoustics are very powerful tools to help people get into that mindset. Basically, I believe allowing us to slip beyond that veil, to
Right.
come into touch with that consciousness that is far grander than the limited trickle that we experience as human beings, incarnate in these physical forms.
So when you've and in your in this book, Proof of Heaven, you talk about the Monroe Institute, which focuses a lot, I think, on astral projection. And I've also studied shamanism. I've talked to people on astral projection, and it sounds when I read your book that the when I've talked to the people in astral projection and when I've done journeys myself, it sounds the most like what you talk about in your book. But now that over the last 5 or 6 years since you've been meditating, how similar is the experience of your near death experience to some of the meditations that you do for an hour or longer? How are they similar or different?
Well, I've been able to return to those realms. I mean, I have gotten deeply into the core realm and the Gateway Valley, the beings and entities I've developed much more profound relationships with. So I use that kind of meditation not just to recover memories of the NDE, but to actively participate and coordinate with those deities, that knowing, that infinite power of love. Every bit of that is accessible. And that's why I often say you don't have to die or almost die to get this, to know everything I know about this. The deep meditation is very powerful, but don't expect to do it, 3 or 4 or 10 times and then say, well, it's not working for me. It really does take commitment, and you get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
I will point out that a lot of the work that I've done with Sacred Acoustics is stuff that did begin there with our introduction through the work of Robert Monroe. I would like to credit him with being an incredible pioneer, but the Sacred Acoustics tones to me are the most powerful I know of, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why I use that. I work with them. They're developing these tones every day, every week. They're coming up with better and more powerful tones that work for different things. Now, it's important to point out, though, that in fact, I have not yet fully duplicated that incredible sense of ultra reality that
Mm-hmm.
I witnessed in the Gateway
The
and in the
realness that
core
you're talking
during
about.
my NDE, the
Yeah.
ultra realness. I
Yeah.
mean, I certainly have gotten this, this material realm that we live in, this little space time, is a very murky reality. It's very foggy. It's very dreamlike
Hmm.
compared to the nature of those
Well.
realms.
Well.
And that's the part that's kind of interesting. But of course, near-death experiences by the millions report exactly that. In fact, more than half of near-death experiencers struggle with how to convey that notion of ultra reality. And part of the thing to understand there is that, in this existence here in this body, living day to day, my brain is serving as a filter to really kind of dumb it down to that little teeny trickle.
Right.
And it's even filtering time and space down to this little teeny segment that it seems able to understand and comprehend. But that's what's so astonishing when we get beyond the veil, which
Mm-hmm.
we do in near death experiences, shared death experiences, all these other phenomena of kind of extraordinary consciousness, spiritually transformative experiences occur when we get in touch with that consciousness that is far grander.
Now,
And that's what makes it so worthwhile.
I want to go back to one of the things that you said about, you've actually studied a lot about other people's near-death experiences. And what I find unique about your specific experience is that it wasn't, it didn't, maybe you had this, but when I read this book, it really didn't talk about, a life review. It didn't necessarily talk about, you visited your sister, which you didn't realize that was your sister until the very end. But it had a very different kind of arc than some of the other near-death experiences. Have have you kind of reconciled why? Like, if I mean, I'm sure you've gone up and journeyed or did your the beats or the sacred
Right.
sounds and asked like, why me? What do you want from me? Why?
Well, I think it's important to point out, and this is something I get into a little bit of proof of heaven, and I get into a little bit more in the map of heaven, the second book. But it has to do with the fact that I was amnesic. I
Hmm.
had no memory of Eben Alexander's life before coma.
Hmm.
All of my personal memories, as far as I can tell, seem to have been completely devastated. I had no words, I had no language.
Hmm.
I mean, I had a completely empty slate,
Hmm.
which when I did come back, you can bet for months and months, especially as I started reading the near death literature, which I had never read before. But I was deeply mystified by that amnesia. And only over a deep analysis and reflection over the last few years have I come to realize kind of why that happened and why it was so crucial for me to get so many of the lessons that I got from my journey. I really had to have that empty slate.
Hmm.
Part of it was showing me that the brain does not create consciousness. And that, I believe, was a huge part of why I had this gram-negative bacterial meningitis,
Hmm.
perfect model for human death. And it provided an excellent demonstration of the fact that your most robust, rich, vibrant, alive conscious awareness comes when you're free from the shackles of the physical brain. Now,
Hmm.
that amnesia is very important to understand. I mean, when I came back to this world, my brain was so devastated after that week in coma due to meningitis that I came back with no words or language initially in those first
Hmm.
minutes.
Hmm.
No words or language. I didn't even recognize my loved ones at the bedside. I mean,
Hmm.
my mother, my sisters, my sons. I had no idea who these
Hmm.
beings were.
Yeah.
All I knew was where I had been on this extraordinary spiritual journey. I had no memory of any
Wow.
of my religious thoughts from before coma, none of that scientific knowledge, more than 15 years teaching at Harvard Medical School. Every bit of that was gone when I first
Hmm.
came back. Now,
Hmm.
the interesting thing is it returned quickly. Words and language came back over hours and days, childhood memories over weeks. All of my knowing of science, physics, neuroscience came back over roughly 2 months.
Hmm.
And in fact, the interesting thing is I came to realize, um, especially in the years afterward, I would have certain conversations with people and came to realize that the memories that had come back and formed up at that kind of 2 month time point were more complete than they had been before the coma.
Wow,
So
that's
people would often
interesting.
ask me, are you back at 80%, 90%, 95%? I'd say, well, it really feels like I'm back at about 110%, which was
Wow.
kind of shocking. And of course, that was something that took me, as I said, several years to realize. And because it had to do with details of certain memories, conversations that I had with other people, kind of remembering stories from the distant past. And
Right.
then when we would go back into that after my coma, I started to realize that I actually had more complete memories than I had had before my coma.
So do
And
you
that
think
had
you
a
had a
lot.
life review, but you didn't remember it?
No, I don't think, I think that the life review was not part of my journey because my journey was intended to be something different. I often like to say it's kind of makes my NDE the exception that proves the rule
Hmm.
because it showed me as a neuroscientist very clearly that brain does not create consciousness. But if I had had memories of my life before coma and those had been invoked in this life review, then I would have been more likely to dismiss the whole thing. I couldn't
Oh, I
have
see. Oh,
that
I get it.
memory of my life before going
I
on. And
get it.
likewise, that deep mystery of, my father, because my father had passed over 4 years before my coma. As I point out in Proof of Heaven, it was a very deep mystery to me after reading all that near-death experience literature after my coma. Why wasn't my father there? He
Hmm.
should have been there. If I had scripted this, first and foremost, he would have been right there
Yeah.
front and center.
Yeah.
But he was nowhere to be found. In fact, my spiritual guide on this journey was that beautiful girl on the butterfly wing. And to
Right.
me, that was a really deep mystery that kind of drove me to try and come to an understanding of it. But again, it points out that the amnesia was important. Uh, in fact,
Right. Because you wouldn't have
early on,
believed any of this had you had a life review, had you seen your dad, you'd been
then
like,
I could have
oh yeah,
said,
that's
well,
just a
that's what we
memory.
thought. You see who you want to see on your way out.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
trick of the dying brain. Forget about it.
Right.
Would have been more tempted to dismiss it all, in spite of the fact that I think, the fact that I had a 1 in 10 million diagnosis, E. coli meningitis in adults, spontaneous cases are very, very rare. And then that was about a 1 in 10 million chance. And then my recovery was about 1 in a billion. I mean, there
Right.
was really no explanation in Western medicine for that recovery. And that's why
Yeah.
I'm often asked to speak to medical groups, surgical groups, because they get it. They realize what's going on here. And it's
Yeah.
all about a complete revolution in our scientific understanding of the nature of consciousness and really coming to a new depth of understanding of the mind-body debate that's been going on for 2,400 years.
So do you think we have? So you think you're feeling hopeful that people actually are understanding us and actually are going to move to a new place?
I basically have no doubt about that.
Hmm.
We are awakening. And I would actually predict that the simplistic falsehoods of scientific materialism that try to pretend that the physical is the only thing that exists and that there's no fundamental reality to consciousness, soul, spirit, the divine, that in fact within a decade or two, that kind of thinking will be in the same dustbin as, oh, the sun goes around the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the earth is flat. Well,
Right.
that's where the thinking of brain creates consciousness and the only thing that exists is physical. That's where those kind of thought systems will be going over the next decade or so.
Hmm.
This is a scientific revolution that is going to shift this world like nothing has for the last few thousand years.
Hmm.
Tremendous revelation in our understanding of the nature of reality.
And are you doing scientific studies to prove that this is true, or what kinds of
Well,
things are you
I
doing?
do a lot of work. Most of my own personal research now involves meditation, involves using
Hmm.
differential sound frequencies and trying to get very deep into all of that and to share those tools with other people. Now, I do a lot of collaborative work with groups around the world who are interested in consciousness. And in fact, one of my main interests is to try and provide some financial support for that research. And that's why I try to do some fundraising to help with those groups
Mm-hmm.
because there are several very advanced scientific groups around the world who are studying consciousness, but they are horribly strapped for funds. I mean, this is not
Mm-hmm.
mainstream, and it's been very difficult to fund some of this work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it over the years has been called parapsychology or
Mm-hmm.
psi phenomena.
Right.
And uh, I would say, for example, the group at the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, the group, Ed Kelly, Bruce Grayson, and others, who put those wonderful books, Irreducible Mind and Beyond Physicalism, out there. They're doing some fantastic work. But again, they could use a tremendous amount of funding. They're in great need for that kind of thing. Likewise, say the Institute of Noetic Sciences out in California, Dean Radin, the group that was started by Edgar Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
This is all, these are all very high level groups,
Mm.
top notch work. And yet it's difficult to do on such a shoestring
Mm.
budget.
Mm-hmm.
And there are groups of scientists around the world who are kind of networked to try and come to a deeper understanding of all this.
Well, I'm hoping that they'll get funding. And we should go to tell us your website if people want to actually get some information with the books that you referenced. And
Right. I would encourage people to go to Eben Alexander, that's EB as in Baker, enalexander.com. And there's a reading list there that I think is very informative and some other links to videos and interviews where people can learn a lot more. Also, I'd recommend people go to Eternia, ETERNEA.org. And I mentioned that at the end of Proof of Heaven, the very last page after the text there is a shout out to Eternia, a group that I started with John Odette. This is all about frontier science. Eternia.org is a place where people can leave their own experiences. There's a repository there,
cool.
a database for storing all kind, not just near-death experiences, but all manner of spiritually transformative experiences. Also, for those who are seeking tools for deep meditation, I would recommend sacredacoustics.com. That's one word, sacredacoustics.com. They have some free downloads. They have some incredibly powerful sound journeys that you can access there, and also a lot of very good informative tips about meditation and about going within, silencing that little voice in the head, because the voice in the head is not consciousness. Okay, it's a little more than kind of the way the ego communicates to us, but there's a much greater wisdom within. And what we do in meditation is try and develop that deep sense of awareness of the observer self and a certain sense of detachment in a way. And that is something that we can all come in touch with in deep meditation and come to realize that that little voice in our head, the voice of rational, logical thought and all of that, but also the voice of the ego and concepts of self, which in many ways are false, we have access to far greater wisdom than that. And that's why I encourage people to get those tools from sacredacoustics.com and learn more at ebenalexander.com.
Thank you so much. This is so fascinating. We're going to have you on the show again to talk about your newest book. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
CJ,
it means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.